I am here representing Quanta Standard, and also just to have a brief conversation about what we're doing in the field of quantum. So it's wonderful that we've had a great Congress that's been going on here as well. So one of the things that I am working through is how I'm thinking about and embracing quantum and the approaches with quantum. And the reason why I'm here is just last year I retired from the Department of War as one of the senior leaders there. And I have to say that I was perhaps one of the most vocal critics and opponents and skeptics of quantum. So it was the fall of 2017. A lot of the senior leaders, we had gathered out at the Jacob Smart Center at Joint Base Andrews, and then Secretary of the Air Force, Dr. Heather Wilson, had asked me the question. She said, Troy, if I had one more dollar to invest, where should I put it? And the other senior leaders jumped in. Of course, being part of the Department of the Air Force, it was, well, invest in more pilots, invest in more maintainers, invest in more civilians, more enlisted, invest in more into the flying hours so we can increase the throughput of pilot training, or invest more into depot maintenance. And she asked the question, she goes, well, what about investing in STEM, in this emerging technology known as quantum computing, of which I replied, that's a bridge too far. We're not ready for it right now. And when the time comes, we'll cross that bridge at that time. And then we made certain decisions as we looked at Air Force strategy. But silently, I started to inquire a little more and read a little more about quantum technology, quantum computing, quantum sensors, and quantum communication. But I still held fast to that position that now is not the time, because our investments should be in operations, in readiness, in modernizations, and of course, in people. Well, when I've had time to do some executive introspection and retrospection, I realized that I may have been misguided in the framework that I was using. And so here are the three mistakes that I've made when it comes to quantum and how I've embraced them. And so the first one is this myth of the low-hanging fruit. And Mike Wittgenstein has written an incredible article about the myth of low-hanging fruit, of which most of the executives and the conversations that we've had throughout the day as well kind of lead to the exact same thing, because I was guilty as charged, because the focus that I had was, well, what is the ones that is going to give me the greatest return on investment in the shortest amount of time? And what are those quick wins and those quick victories that we can get right now? And we all know that quantum computing is not a low-hanging fruit by any stretch of the imagination, but also it's not a high-hanging fruit either. So our role is to make that fruit within the reach of senior decision makers and in front of senior leaders. And so I didn't make that reach to this fruit called quantum computing. Instead, I resisted it, because the focus was on modernization, on operations, and on people. And the R&D can stay right where R&D was. Well, here's the thing that a lot of the senior leaders, and we've heard this throughout this day, are asking as far as how to make that reach is, so how do I repurpose my workforce? That should have been the focus that I had, and that could have been the fruit that would have been within reach of our senior leaders, the reach of the decisions that I could have made as part of Air Force strategy, is repurposing the workforce. Especially when a weapon system is retired or a contract is expired, what do you do with that force? And so creating those on-ramps into the workforce, we talk about the talent pipeline. I'm talking about building on-ramps into the talent pipeline that we can use right now, not one that we wait until it's K through 12, which is very important, or at the community college level or at the university level, which is also important. But how do you build on-ramps in the meantime? And the way you do that is repurposing the workforce after a contract has expired or after a weapon system is retired. And so you have, whether they're enlisted members or civilian members or even sometimes officers, is repurpose them. You're not going to have them at the quantum expertise level as the White House has put out that framework, and I agree and adopt that exact same framework. But where can you have them at the proficiency level, at the awareness level, and that's how you repurpose the workforce and put them in those positions when they are ready, that technology finally catches up and moves from the lab into the operational environment. You already have a quantum ready workforce that is already at the expertise, because we know that the United States produces on average about 48 PhDs in quantum physics every year. That's not our focus. The focus is, where do you build, and can you build those on-ramps for a quantum proficient and a quantum aware workforce? And that's dealing with technicians, that's dealing with maintainers of the hardware, that's going to deal with people that range from different various parts that are in quantum adjacent career fields, whether it's finance or healthcare, logistics, whatever it may be, as well as the software engineers, product engineers, and continue to build this ecosystem of a quantum workforce by building on-ramps as well. That was very important that I could have done within the Department of the Air Force, specifically while I was serving on active duty. So we saw that, the good news is we saw that the recent fiscal year 26 budget shows that there are 61 lines in the R&D budget that has quantum associated with the R&D projects. But at that time, when I was a skeptic, the R&D budget in the Air Force was about 20 billion, but zero tied into quantum. Now it's 52 billion, of which we saw within the Department of War writ large, 61 product lines tied into the R&D efforts as well. So that's important. The second mistake that I had to embrace is this term called UDEU. And it's a French term, it's a zete un kureu, right? So zete un kureu is something that's a military strategy when we think about being able to have this glance of the battlefield, whether it's a military battlefield or it's a corporate battlefield, and be able to look at the advantages and disadvantages of the battlefield and make quick decisions from there. We train our general officers to have this kureu. And we also, talk about Malcolm Gladwell's, blink. And I did that. I had the kureu, and I did what Malcolm Gladwell said to do. I blinked, and I made my decisions. And it did not include quantum technology at that time. And this is the struggle that a lot of senior leaders are making, and you heard the panel, before. How do you make it a priority? Well, here's what they're competing against. They're competing against operational readiness, because as a commander, I am being graded on my operational readiness and being able to fight tonight. So I got combatant commanders saying I need to be able to present the forces now and be in combat ready. Then you look on the other hand, it's like, well, I have to do my modernization efforts, and what equipment do I need to divest and invest for the long term for war fighting? And then, of course, you have people that you have to take care of as well. And so as you look at the operational environment, that is where the focus becomes. So the mistake that I made is I didn't hold my glance long enough to ask the question, so what does quantum computing change for us in the Department of War? Just a simple question. In this kureu and in this blink, if I would just held my glance just long enough, just to ask that question, so what's changed? And the answer is the character of war has changed. The nature of war still remains the same, but the character of war has changed. And we've heard the conversations, there's no need for me to repeat them, but we're talking about speed, precision, automation. But then you also start talking about Q Day, as most of us heard about, or the Davidson's window as well. And these are the things that have changed in the operational environment. And so one of the speakers before had said, how do you win a contract within the Department of War, Department of DOD, is when we come into the room and have a conversation across from me with the senior leader to talk about that was my timer. Let's see if that turns off. Oh, sorry about that. I just moved over here. Anyhow, you said 3 more minutes, right? And I was trying to time it as well. Yeah. And so, going back to as far as, what has changed is the character of war and having conversations with the senior leaders and sharing with the senior leaders as far as here's what's changed in the character of war, and here's how we meet your needs, and here how we will help you write the requirements. And I know we said in other panels is, well, the DOD or the Department of War needs to write their requirements a little bit better. I would say, remember this, the war fighters are focusing on fighting the war and preparing and training to fight the war with the resources and the tools that they have in their hands right now. That's how they're being graded. So industry coming in and that collaboration, working closely with each other, can help them determine what the needs are and the requirements are so they're not doing it by themselves. And that fills in a little bit of the white space that they have, very limited white space that they have, on their calendar. And this is where this partnership comes in together with industry, academia, and the military and federal government. And then the last part as well as we wrap up is that third part, and we heard as well, is this working together, this collaboration with industry, academia, the labs, federal, state level, public-private partnership, international levels with allies and partners are the most important part of this collaboration and building a strategy when it comes to quantum computers, quantum communications, or quantum sensing as well. So these are the mistakes that I've made and that I've embraced, throughout my career, and things that I could have done differently or better. And that's why after I've had my Damascus Road experience, I am now focused as a champion advocate for quantum computing and helping bridge that gap between industry and the federal government, mostly Department of War and specifically the Department of the Air Force.